all of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the walls. The chair is against the walls. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our daily gun show. Come to live each weeknight at midnight Eastern, approximately, and talk about guns for an hour. And from this panel discussion, we send out links to people over on gunchannels.com. Gun Channels is a community we built a while back, going on 6 years, and it's for people that want to have conversations like this about firearms that aren't just buying their first gun or their 700th gun or going to the range every weekend, or maybe you do go to the range every weekend. So we got Cycle Camp joining us from Connecticut. Thanks for joining.
Hey there. I hope everybody's doing good.
I don't know how many everybody's there is because we started kind of late tonight, and Clover is still going live over there, and we only got 4 people over here, but we got Kinky out there, Guy, and you, and me, and Pants, and his DTP out there. So we got our core group. And what were you saying? You were just chatting about something offline about Tulsa?
Yeah, well,
about Tulsa.
I just mentioned to Pants that, if universal background checks, I think it passed the House and it's going to the Senate, I mean. And I'm kind of wondering, if that happens, what's going to happen to, the big gun shows like Wanamaker's, where even if it's a private sale, you still have to go through a background check. And like in Connecticut, we have this in Connecticut already, but you don't have to go to an FFL. There's a phone number you can call with the state where you can do the same thing that an FFL does. So as a private individual, I personally want to sell my gun to Bob. Bob has a pistol permit, so I assume he's not a prohibited person. And I can call directly to a number at the state and get the same authorization number and make that private sale to Bob. So it sucks that it's registration and it's Mother May I, with personal property and stuff. But at least I don't have to go to an FFL to do it. I can call right to the state, give them my information, get the number, fill out the form, and turn it in, and I'm done. And I don't know what the hell would happen. I mean, in Tulsa, if every table you stopped at and you wanted to buy a gun, it was like, okay, now hold on a minute, I got to make this phone call. And I don't think the UBS that they're talking about with the feds, I thought it had a thing in there that said you had to go to an FFL to do it. They didn't have a mechanism for if as much as I hate it, I think despise would probably be a better word. At least if a private individual just made a phone call, but having to get this third party involved, that really sucks.
Well, they're not doing anything about it to be convenient or subtle or useful or effective. It's designed to be a deterrent against gun ownership.
Yeah, no, that's
true. A deterrent from guns being on the streets. Their overall goal is no guns. They made it perfectly clear they didn't hold any punches, and they used it as that stick every time there was an amendment. Let's say for someone suicidal and they don't feel themselves, they feel that they're slipping away mentally and they don't want possession of their firearms. They're no longer able to give them to a friend that they value. So
just hold on to this for me, just in case,
Right. So that's you're no longer allowed to even do things for that. They wouldn't accept that as, this isn't just a weird circumstance. This is a situation that they call on. In the same breath, they'll suggest that there's 100 firearms killings a day, blindly lying or deceiving, suggesting that those 2/3 of those are suicides. So when they really want to stop these 100 killings that they'll suggest happen every day, then when an amendment to their infringement is brought up to offer a place for those people to be able to move their firearms to someone else, even if that they say their cry is even if it saves one life. However, they wouldn't accept that as a amendment to their idea here, to their new infringement. Same with domestic violence. If you know of someone, if you're not an immediate family member and you know of someone who's being literally hurt, and they're not able to acquire a firearm in any other way, they've just removed that option from those victims as well, and anyone who wants to help those victims. So when those amendments were brought to this quote unquote piece of legislation, they were dismissed as, I can't think of the word, like superfluous, whatever, like extra, non-necessary, like designed to confuse, when actually they were designed to stop holes in there.
Well, real life situations, yeah.
So because they were unwilling or to even listen to those, and then went as far as to suggest that those were designed to interfere with their agenda, then it's obvious that their agenda isn't safety, and it isn't to save lives. It is to create a burden on ownership, and cost, and time and everything that makes firearms less available. Their goal, I think, overall, I'm speaking for them, is to see no firearms in the planet, and they think of federal bureaucracy, barriers to ownership, and prohibitions to ownership are a means to that end. They believe that without the legal means to acquire a firearm, that criminals are going to be denied the availability of firearms, and therefore the world's going to be a safer place. So that's the mindset.
Right, which counteracts the reality that criminals don't buy firearms from dealers.
Well, but that's their goal. So when you say like, hey, this isn't convenient, or this doesn't even work with the way this, that we've established systems based on its infringements from 1968 already, it's altering those traditions we have, or customs we have. Well, again, their goal is to make it so that we can't even go to gun shows. The gun shows don't exist, and that free commerce doesn't exist, right? So it's to their goal.
Yeah.
And definitely, I guess convenience was never a consideration in theirs. Their whole thing here is to create lack of convenience, right? To make it difficult to obtain firearms and possess firearms.
Yeah, and they would rather have a guy commit suicide than come up with a mechanism for him to temporarily divest himself of his guns if he felt like he might do himself harm. And that same guy won't go to a shrink, because if he does and it gets reported, then he loses his gun rights forever. So they really got you in a bad way. It's all comes to boxing you in so that you can't be accountable and self-aware at all. The government has to step in. And it's bullshit. DT Pfeiffer on the Gun Channel side asked if the thing I was talking about with our local state thing, is it a state-run thing, not a NICS check? It is a state-run thing, but it's done through what's called the Fusion Center, and the Fusion Center is the guy that collects. In Connecticut, he collects the state information as well as the federal information when they do a NICS check. So it is a state thing, but that state entity can reach out to the feds and do the NICS check through the feds. So not only do they do a local in-state check to make sure that we don't have anything bad about you, they also do the federal check. So it's both, and that's pretty cool. So I thought that was pretty neat. But it is, yeah, gee, if you self-report yourself for psychiatric help, you got a good chance, not 100%, but you got a good chance of losing your gun rights. If you just wanted to say, like you were saying earlier, boy, I'm really feeling depressed and I just don't think I ought to have a bunch of guns in the house. It's that bad. Would you mind holding them for me? Well, now that's illegal, because you got to and in Connecticut, what would you do? Because you can't transfer the black rifles anyway, because we're not allowed to transfer those because they're banned weapons. They really are putting us in a situation where you have to go rogue for all
Or,
practical purposes. You have to become a felon. You have to
or,
become a criminal.
or forfeit them. So in other words, they
Right.
stacked laws. They created laws, and then the result of the accumulation of laws creates a situation where you were able to purchase some property based on characteristics, and then as the laws accumulated and compounded, the situation became you're able to legally possess it, but literally there's no option for you to transfer it to anything except destroy it. And when you're in that kind of situation and you add illness to that, it's just unhealthy. And obviously illness is unhealthy, but it's just an unhealthy situation that the society creates with this like do good, uh, whatever they claim a do good uh, intent, but the result is just mess. And like you say, it's this blind devotion that the state can solve everything, no matter what it is. The state can solve it. If it's something that hurts everybody, the state must have the solution to it.
Well, this is what happens when you make rules and laws and you just totally ignore reality. The reality is these kind of laws don't affect criminals. So saying, well, we're doing this to stop criminals from doing a certain thing, it's wait a minute, but the reality is criminals don't do that. They don't care about this stuff. Like, it's Facebook today. There's a guy put in, he says, yeah, so now the criminals that are buying their guns, on the street will make sure to ask those guys that are selling them the guns whether they've gone through the NICS check. Right? I mean, it's total the idiocy of this is just ludicrous.
Well, I wouldn't laugh because I don't think it's idiocy. If this was 1980, maybe, if this was 1974 and the 68, restrictions, infringements were new, maybe. But they've had people that have excelled through school and learned manipulation of society and individuals through different methods, and they've taken all those techniques and all the failures they've had in the past, and they continue to hone these these pieces of legislation intently to create situations. So this isn't accidental. I don't believe at all. I think this is definitely intentional. And what they're going to, well, they're getting into the results of all of this, but it hasn't actually passed, and there's no need to. Well, I don't know. Maybe there is. If there's interest, we can talk about the potentials of this, but the consequences of it. But yeah, to suggest that they did this the way they claim, on the surface, they suggest this is all done in an effort for safety and blah, blah, blah. But, it's again, the overall goal, the results of all of what they've created, and they've strategized what these things are. Or if they haven't, then they're guilty of not representing well, because what they've created is it needs to be part of the equation, right? You can't ignore existing laws when you're creating new regulations, because that's, again, creates the situations like what you're experiencing with the black rifles in Connecticut, right? You create situations that are unique. I don't know what to call that. When you create special circumstances there for people, it makes it difficult to create any law that covers anybody.
They use, first of all, I really honestly believe that they're showing their true colors now, and it's obvious to anybody with half a brain that, like DT Pfeiffer said, it's just an excuse to advance an agenda. It has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. I'll give you an example. There's a law that they want to pass in Connecticut called Ethan's Law, and it has to do with the safe storage of firearms. And they want to mandate that people, if you have kids in the house, you have to lock your guns up in a gun safe. It has to be locked up. It can't be anywhere else. I mean, obviously if it's on your body, that's okay, but it can't be, like in a end table next to your side table next to your bed, or that kind of thing. And the funny thing about it is, the whole bit with Ethan was, Ethan and his buddy were a couple of teenagers who got into their family's gun safe and were playing games with the guns, and then one of them ended up getting killed. The law, as proposed, would have had absolutely no impact on that because the gun was secured in a gun safe. And these were not little bitty kids. These were young teenagers, 13, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, and should have known better. But they used the again, here's where they used the premise of, well, these kids got access to guns and now everybody needs to do safe storage. And it's like, but wait a minute, they were safely stored. The kids got access to them anyway. What are you going to do about that? And why are you punishing me because that guy's kid either knew the combination to her safe or knew where he hid his key or that kind of, that's not my fault. I didn't do anything. I didn't cause that to happen. But again, it's to pass an agenda. We don't want people to have ready access to their firearms.
So
in the long run, they don't have any access.
So, like in this particular circumstance, we're talking pretty decent comparison to cars. There's about as many cars as there are firearms. Because there's as many cars as there are firearms, I'd say, I don't know, point can be made that there's about as much access to either. If you don't have a bunch of firearms laying around, you could probably go somewhere where there are. If you don't have a car, all you have to do is go outside. There's cars around. If you don't know how to just drive a car, you can figure out how to steal a car. If you don't know how to buy a gun or you can't, then you'll figure out how to steal a gun. I mean, it's just obvious that there's property that exists. Somebody who's, with intent is going to figure out how to grab it. And then when you talk about deaths, there's approximately the same number of automobile accident deaths as there are all firearms deaths. So in that case, I think they're kind of similar. And I've used the suggestion that if you drove from here to there, however many cars you pass, you're probably going to pass that many firearms because there's about the same amount in the country. So with all that being said, do they suggest that there's responsibility to the owners of cars to restrict access to cars? I mean, we have keys because they're property and they cost us, their resources. So we don't just leave them around like communists for anybody to use. So we have keys to them, and there's, because they cost something, we pursue them if they get stolen or whatever. But is there any kind of concern that cars, there's too easy access to cars that young children can just go pick up keys off of a hook? A lot of times just sitting on a hook, hanging on a corner of the hallway, just on a hook. There's keys to an automobile, and they can get in that automobile and drive for sometimes hundreds of miles before they even run out of fuel. They have high capacity tanks in these things. Even though the person only drives back and forth to work every day, they could easily stop and reload their gas tank, every couple of days. So they could have just 30 gallons, maybe 10 gallons in there instead of 30. But instead they have 30 gallons in there. That person, that kid who has access to that vehicle could just do all kinds of go on a rampage for hundreds of miles.
No, but again, that's just facts. That's reality, and nobody cares about facts and reality. All they care about is, and they don't care about the emotions. They just use emotions to make the argument. The bottom line is, we want to disarm people because then the state can do whatever it wants, and nobody can do a damn thing about it. And like other people have said, the Second Amendment doesn't have anything to do with hunting, and it doesn't have anything to do with self-defense. The Second Amendment is our way of saying a tyrannical government, we need a way to oppose a tyrannical government. That is the whole bit about the Second Amendment. And we got to stop soft soaping this stuff, man. We got to stop talking about, I need it for self-defense. Well, bullshit, man. I need it to defend myself against the government that oversteps its boundaries.
Okay, so let's think about that for a second. Did you happen to see Yankee did a video complaining about Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
So, did you see that Joe Rogan show that he's talking about? I forgot what episode. So whenever Yankee did that video, I don't know what, I was sitting here doing something or waiting for something to upload. So I started to watch Yankee's video just because I don't watch very many Yankee videos, and it seemed interesting. Like, I'd heard of Joe Rogan before or whatever, seen him on TV. So I watched that video, and he talks about this episode. So whenever, and that was like at the beginning of Yankees video, he says, I'm going to reference this video. So I paused Yankees video and I went over and watched the, like, I think it was the hour and a half mark or something in this 2 hour chat with some guy who's a English, I think a reporter from England going to Mexico to report on life in Mexico. And it's an interview with this guy, and they start talking about guns at like the 100 or hour and a half mark, and it's horrible. It's cringy to listen to because it's wrong. They're assuming things that are incorrect about law and the way that the way that guns are. For example, they said they were talking about 50 BMGs. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And Rogan says, "Oh yeah, those things are about the size of an apple. It's a bullet the size of a softball." Or he says something ridiculous like that. He goes, maybe a little bit smaller, but military ordnance or something. It's just something ridiculous. So this guy's suggestion, this reporter from England, I think, or somewhere in Europe, in Mexico, his suggestion is that a 50 BMG is used by the bad guys, the cartels in Mexico, and they'll set up on the hillside and they'll shoot at vehicles, which is what the 50 BMG is designed for. It's an
material
that's designed to shoot vehicles. That's what it's for. It doesn't blow them up. It just puts a big hole in the engine and they don't work anymore. And they ruin your vehicle. You have to walk. So he suggests that since that's the thing, why would we need them in the United States? And then, of course, Joe Rogan, the idiot, says, well, yeah, you don't need those for hunting. What do you hunt with a 50 and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if he really thinks a bullet's the size of a softball or what he thinks, but heck, the rifle's 4 foot long. And even though the barrel is, not that big around, he thinks that it shoots something out that looks like a soda can. Great. So they're suggesting that you shouldn't have those. So I'm sitting here thinking, and obviously I have an opinion on firearms or whatever, but you would think anybody who's like able to put logic to it, they're going to suggest that we don't want the tyranny that they have from the outlaw gangs in Mexico. So they're going to outlaw 50s. And then what stops outlaw gangs and cartels or whatever you want to call organized crime? What stops organized crime? Bunch of laws, bunch of police, or the idea that anybody in the neighborhood can get their own 50 and shoot right back at them. So this concept that you can't defend against tyranny with an M16, that you can't defend, you don't need something larger like a 50 or even a 40 millimeter grenade launcher, which is the under barrel grenade launcher, that small arm that a lot of infantry soldiers are given. So it sounds big, but it's just a regular under barrel grenade launcher. But something like that, it's people will laugh that off. You can't defend against tyranny with a under barrel grenade launcher because they can only picture the cartoonish exaggeration of an individual standing in front of a tank with a pea shooter or whatever. And that's ridiculous. What stops tyranny is the knowledge that the subjects, the people they want to tyrannize, aren't going to take it, and that they have means of resisting. So tyranny never starts. We never get the beginnings of the bite of the cartels. 100 miles south of me, like an hour south of me, I go across the international border with Mexico, and there are cartels that have more power and more influence in their area than local or federal law enforcement. More power than any equivalent of a sheriff, more power than any individual in that area, because they are individuals and they're breaking the law, and they have the firepower that in the intent to destroy and kill, that it makes people live in fear of them. So if you believe that tyranny only comes from the Democrats or the Republicans, then you're either uneducated or you're intentionally ignoring the real things that'll tyrannize, and that would be organized crime and just anybody with a bigger stick who has influence over an area. And the idea that you can't use an AR-15 like they used successfully in Koreatown in the Los Angeles riots in our lifetimes to stop an angry mob, a group of hundreds of people with violent intent, torches and their own guns. Individuals on rooftops, the silhouette of an AR-15 stopped a mob of people. So to suggest that you don't need those to resist tyranny, and that the presence of those, the knowledge that those are there, doesn't stop tyranny from existing in the first place, is, well, again, it's not just, I don't think that they're unaware of that. I think they understand that. They want the tyranny, they want the conflict, they want the strife, because they want to either see our system gone and some other system replaced, or they want to see their people put into the position of influence in our current system. And I don't think there's any reason to, that's just how evil is. There's always going to be the dark as the opposite of the light. So you're going to find people that are going to, exploit a bureaucracy or a system that we've got. And this is how we defend against it. Either we talk about it or you sit in those seats and watch us talk about it.
Yeah, and anybody that thinks that you can't use a more outdated weapon to oppose tyranny doesn't understand the lessons of Afghanistan and Vietnam.
And literally, right now, individuals with firearms are resisting us, one of the largest superpowers on the planet.
Well, and Afghanistan went through the French, the Russians, the British, and the Americans, and they beat us all off.
Well, they held us all off.
They did it using old crappy boomsticks, because guerrilla warfare and shit. And Vietnam was the same way. These guys didn't have ultramodern weapons. They didn't have, Phantom jet fighters and all that kind of shit. But we didn't win that one, as I recall. And that's why these guys are not going to be satisfied until they take every single weapon away from us. Because as long as we've got anything, we're a danger to the government. Which is, of course, exactly what we should be.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's so much, I'm sure that like the actual people sitting there who are shouting the loudest to get rid of our property and our rights to own the property and whatever the consequences of that ownership is, I don't think they even care. I don't think they fear. I think they're that oblivious. I mean, I don't really think that they are ones holding the puppet strings and also being the figureheads. You know what I mean? I think those figureheads are just, that's their 15 minutes of fame. Like that's their thing. Like they're always going to be known for being the assault weapons idiot or the background check fool. And maybe they've just played that game so long. That's what the tools that they've got in the shed. So that's the tools they bring to the game every time they play. But there's more to it than. Or there's others involved, and I don't think the people that are playing the game really care about or think that there's ever going to be some sort of a tyranny that needs to be resisted in the streets, I guess is what I'm saying, like, in actual bullets hitting something type of situation. I think they think that's science fiction or history. Or do you think that they seriously want to do some stuff and they see this as a necessary step in order to twist our arm behind our back?
I don't know. I've always asked myself, if someday I get that knock on the door, at least I hope it's a knock on the door, and they come and say, "Hey, we're here to take all your guns away." I really hope I'm not stupid enough to go out in a blaze of glory. You know what I mean? This, you can have them bullets first, blah, blah, blah. Because then I'm out of the game. Then I'm out of the fight. And I've that's one of the, you were doing good idea, bad idea the other day. And one of the things, I hate to talk about it in public, but it's kind of like, I certainly wouldn't bury firearms on my own property because it's too easy to use metal detectors to find them. But wow, shouldn't I get like a paid cash little storage area, maybe in Vermont or any other state where you just break the linkage, where it's hard for them to find it,
No.
and take some of my like modern like my military guns and stuff and a shit ton of ammunition and just kind of put it away there.
No, I mean no. I mean you can. I guess you can do it if you want. I suppose there's nothing stopping. It's probably a good idea for lots of reasons, but for reaction or preparation for coming things, I just thought of something else I think might have more. At least I've never heard anybody talk about it before. But when the time comes for something to be dug up, then you've already needed it. So no, I'm not gonna fall down the line of like, well, we should be hiding our stuff. I just don't I'm not down with that. I don't see that as an option for free people. But what about the idea that if you're dealing with infringements and those infringements come with laws, which are words, which are written out with, structure. And we went to J.M. Davis and they told us about how the museum falls into the definitions and structure of these, the way that the laws are written. And they're outside of the typical players that we think about as far as like individuals or military or law enforcement. There's museums. So we also don't think, or at least I don't hear people talk too much about gun clubs or anything. So now I'm going to switch things again and go back to the movie. What was that movie? Death Wish, the original, the real Death Wish, 1972 or something. And do you remember that movie?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so when he goes to
Charles Bronson
and he meets up, and he goes and he meets up with Rockford Files guy, and they take the Rockford Files guy from Tucson, takes him to, actually that's underneath the U of A football stadium, to an indoor shooting range, and it's supposed to be this guy from Rockford Files, his club, his gun club, and it's awesome. It's one of the things I modeled gun channels after. It's this room, it's all cool, and like there's chairs and like these, like, what do they call those things? Like gun racks, I guess. They're what do you call them when they're on the walls and they've got like they're made out of wood and their guns are just in them. They're not like for security or anything. They're just to like literally hold your guns on the wall.
Yeah, that's what we used to call a gun rack in the old days.
Yeah, like literally like at a hunting lodge or something. So those guns are just in racks, like not in safes and not like hidden behind steel, but just sitting there so you can see them and enjoy them and look at them, the aesthetics of them. And then there's this range and you just grab one off the wall and you walk over there and you shoot. So what about if people got together and formed some sort of collaborative, some sort of organizations where they retained ownership, but somehow shared ownership so that these things, like you're talking about, historical, relevant, worth or expensive and interesting guns can not only be shared, but also retained through potential weird legislation and stuff, and then give us a place to a legal sanctuary where these things can stay outside the realm of private ownership or military or law enforcement ownership. Have anybody thought of that concept, or has anybody heard of people talking about that before?
Yeah, but when you again, so let's say they pass universal background checks. So you decide to transfer your gun into this trust, okay? Because it sounds kind of like a trust.
That's probably the word, trust.
Or a club or whatever. Well, now the government knows that there's a trust because you had to go through a NICS check in order to transfer it to the trust. And the trust had to have an officer that had a permit in order for you to transfer it to the trust. Just like my gun club has to have a CFO, I'm sorry, an XO responsible for the firearms, and that guy has to be a legal firearms owner in Connecticut. So, again, those are going to be the first places they go after. They won't worry about the armories because they own the armories, right? But all these collections of people that have all this amassed set of firearms, they're going to come right after you. And the universal background checks is the entryway. It's a gateway into that because it's the gateway to registration. So it's not like there's no hidden place. You know what I mean? That's kind of like off the books that you can
I'm
put.
not talking about hiding. I'm just talking about strategy and gathering resources so that there's more to resist and sidestep it, not necessarily, I'm just thinking strategy or whatever, not trying to, and yeah, I'm not suggesting it's a way to fight it as much as just a way to deal with it.
Well, that's certainly the way that in England that a lot of places you can only own a gun if the gun is part of a club. You have like your little locker at the club and your gun is in your locker and that's where it has to be. It can't be at your house.
Yeah, I'm thinking those are more, I guess that's similar, I suppose, than what I'm talking about. But I guess I was thinking more of like an accumulated collection, so it'd be like on display and be appreciated as opposed to just being like a locker and, facilitating the bureaucracy or whatever. But I'm not suggesting that would be an alternative but maybe even just a way for people to share their collections, because I guess I'm also expanding on it as a resistance to laws, but just as a way to deal with ownership of firearms in general. There's I don't know, you and I are in the same position. We have more than a couple of firearms. It would take a while to even think of them all, right? Once you've acquired a collection of that scale, you've got parts of the collection. Very few people have just one gun and shit tons of them. Most people collect, and then they collect something else. They collect something else. You don't necessarily get rid of your old collection, so you start to accumulate, and then you've got things that are interesting, but more than what you can juggle, more than you can actually, that you might be interested in at the time or whatever. And that's where I'm thinking some of those might be a way that we could, I don't know, the kind of way that people have car shows and motorcycle shows and meet up in parking lots and share their collections and share their property. Just a different way to share property, a way to acquire some real estate, like you say, and create a trust, like you're talking about, and then put parts of collections together. There's people that have collections for investment reasons, and if they're insured, what do they care if they're in a safe somewhere or behind glass somewhere so people can appreciate them? I don't know. I'm kind of evolving that from the discussion of the background checks and all that shit.
Yeah, well, again, I think we're talking apples and oranges here, because I'm talking about the ability to resist a tyrannical government, and and what you're talking about is just a way to have guns available, to people that want to look at them and appreciate them. But that's the first place with the sheriff of that town is going to say, okay, now let's get rid of the guns in town. The first place we're going to Bill's Gun Club, or we're going to the gun trust that we know is at this address, and we're going to take all their guns, and we're going to take their records so we know that we got all their guns.
Well, all right, that's a bunch of ifs, but yeah. So
I don't think that's terribly far-fetched.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I guess you're saying if they're saying, okay, it's time for confiscation. We've had freedom, that didn't work. There was deaths. So then we created some reasonable controls, and that didn't work. So we compromised and got rid of most, casual transfers of firearms, and regulated who can possess and who can transfer. That didn't seem to work. So then we required that they be put in our possession unless you wanted to use them. There was still violence and death, so we just started to confiscate. I mean, that's 3 or 4 steps away, and I don't know if that goes down. I don't know. I guess.
Well, look at the bump stock ban. The bump stock ban. There's no middle ground. They don't have to pay for them. You have to turn them in. You cannot own them. There's no grandfathering. So I could very easily see the Justice Department saying to a judge, you need to give us a warrant to go after Slide Fire's records to find out everybody they sold a bump stock to. Because that's all in keeping with the law, right?
Well, number one, if you had credit card records, maybe you'd have an address or something, but the best you'd have is who you shipped it to, since there's no need to register the item, or if there was like warranty reasons, people might have, but you'd only have addresses for certain people in that circumstance. But to follow your thing through to like a actual thing would be like a firearm where there is an address on it, and if they decided that high capacity, or they consider high capacity, or if they consider to be assault, which is semi-auto, if they made that ruling and said, okay, now those need to be collected, a little different than an accessory at this point. Yeah, I don't know how far you want to go down that road.
Again, with our computerized society now, it's not like these records are probably all written on paper someplace. They probably have computer records of this stuff, and it's not going to be that hard to find those kinds of things. One of the disadvantages of our information society is that it's very easy to get hold of computerized records of things. I mean, I keep computerized records of all the guns that I have. I keep track of every round of literally every single round of ammunition that I have. You can find on a computer database that I have.
Okay.
to
But
where it is, where it came from, how much I paid for it, which cabinet it's stored in.
okay. Now let's say that you did that like, in a way that wasn't obscure. Like you did that in a very obvious way and you labeled all the files very obviously and you put them in folders and the file structure that was fairly obvious. It would still take somebody time to coordinate, or what am I trying to say, like orient themselves with your file system and structure and find it and then open it and then interpret it and then figure it all out. Now, if you put a burden on any of that, weird file structure, hard to physically find the file, coded or secured somehow.
But most people don't think that way.
I don't care. But I'm talking about realistically, though. If we want to actually start
realistically, most people don't think that way.
Are in the CSI departments that can actually deal with that, and how many thumb drives, how many hard drives, how many towers, how many laptops, how many phones, how many tablets, how many chips, how many SD cards are they going to get that have data potentially on them, maybe that have somebody's gun record someplace, and this might give us 6 more guns than what we found, looking around their house. I mean, to get into actual nuts and bolts of going door to door, let's say that there's 100 law enforcement officers that are willing to accept that job. How many houses do they go to before there's not 100 officers anymore? And let's say that they have some sort of robots, so they bring in UN troops, so that's not a variable anymore, and they literally have an unlimited number of troops to go through and go door to door, so that any resistance met at the door is not going to affect the number of soldiers that would be coming door to door. Do you think that people are going to stop at firearms? Do you think that people don't know, like the way that chemicals work and the way that that physics happens, to suggest that could happen for more than about a minute, or realistically in more than a couple of weeks, to see more than a few examples? It would be chaos. Anybody, the representatives who casually pass these things, I don't think are looking at consequences or practically looking at consequences, because most of the scenarios that I see suggest that all gun owners are going to sit quietly with their hands in their laps while the tanks are driving down the street going door to door, and that because we're somehow not organized already, it's some sort of established militia, that we're not going to figure out what to do, or that people that are frustrated aren't going to have any other options once you take a piece of metal with some wood wrapped around it away from them. Free people are free. So I really don't think it's any practical way to scenario people going door to door. I guess, if we talked about the museums and the clubs or something like that, and those being taken, through acts of whatever, and there's literally no one there to do anything about it, so troops could go in and take. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you there. That wouldn't be the best strategy, but I'm also not suggesting you put 72 M16s in that rack. That's for stupid guns and historic stuff and investment guns and engraved guns and interesting calibers and types of actions. That's not for tools. Tools go in a shed somewhere and they don't get paid attention to and fawned over. But I think that the way that they'll do it isn't through door to door. It's not going to be through confrontation. Again, they're aware that that only happens for like 5 minutes, and then there's just no way to sustain a door to door scenario at all. But they'll do it through the universal background checks, where you create a situation where it's definitely difficult and there's legal consequences for obtaining a firearm, without going through the whatever the procedure is going to end up being.
But only if they catch you.
Well, but it's just like anything. Once you put a legal barrier, on casual possession, they're going to limit the number of people that own firearms dramatically. So the number.
Okay. So just like because drugs are banned, nobody gets drugs. And just because, like during the Depression, when not depression, during the what do you call it? When alcohol was illegal, nobody drank alcohol.
Again,
all you do is drive it underground.
It's already underground to some extent, but I think unlike drugs, where you can get it, like right now, they were talking about drugs earlier. Like you get these heroines, so the different, it's this Larcan or Narcan, I forget what it is, some new type of heroin that's super potent. you don't get a choice. You get hooked on a drug and you're continuing to look for the drug, right? I mean, as much as we like to say you can get hooked on guns or whatever, if you never get hooked on guns, that thirst for freedom and recreation and personal defense, that's hard to get without being around them and without them having any kind of legal access. So I'm just saying by making it very difficult to possess or to deal with them, they'll dramatically reduce the number of firearms owner that exist now. And look how many we have now and how we're able to mobilize and active, be active and stuff. So it's difficult for us now once they chop our numbers in half by a lot, and then we continue to demonize us every time something bad happens with a firearm. That's how they'll get rid of firearms. They'll just make it unappealing and difficult and tedious. I suspect. I don't think they're going to go door to door. I guess that's what I was getting at. I just don't see them going to door to door. I think they're going to do the long drawn out way, and with these little, I don't know, these are like the squeezes on the toothpaste tube. Every once in a while, they're going to squeeze a little bit like this, and that's the frustrating part because it's tough to get people angry enough to resist the pressure when they don't see a complete consequence right now. They don't see this as being the ultimate consequence. So it's okay to give this little bit. It's okay to not resist right now.
Well, and that's the danger of the like the bump stock ban, because with the bump stock ban, it's turn them in, and we don't know what's going to happen if people don't turn them in. Assuming that they don't get that GOA doesn't get their stay and all that kind of stuff. But I tell you, anybody that doesn't look at that and see the writing on the wall, there's something seriously wrong with you. I mean, if the same thing happens and they decide to do the same thing and they say, okay, that's it, black rifles, we're done. All your AR-15s and all your AKs, turn them in, guys. Then what's going to happen? And again,
well, they won't do that.
Remember that you make it sound like it's everybody and his brother down the street, but remember, during the American Revolution, it was only 3%, 3 out of 100. And I understand that there's a lot of guns in the world, but a lot of guns because there's guys like me that have literally blah 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 guns. We have a crap ton of guns. And there's not that many individual people, and there certainly aren't that many people that own guns that would be willing to stand up and say, no more. There just aren't that many people around.
A small number, because you talk about there's the people like yourself or myself that have a collection of them, acquired a bunch of them over the years, but then there's people that have a single gun. This was grandpa's or great grandpa's gun, or my dad bought this one to go hunting one time. I don't know what to do with it, and it's in the closet. They're a gun owner and they got one, and who knows if they consider themselves a gun owner, and there's no reason to assume that they have any dedication to the Second Amendment or the freedoms that it protects, right? So yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Now again, it's, what'd you say, 3%? I mean, it definitely does not take that many people to actually.
It was 3. Yeah, during the revolution, only 3 out of 100 people actively worked on the revolution. That were actually people that stood up and took arms. And but
again, that's not, they didn't do that alone. They were supported by others, and I mean that would still happen. I'm just saying there's the 3% are the people standing up, but it took somebody to feed them and get them there and all the rest of that stuff.
Right. But it took an obvious move on the British's part when they finally went to wherever the hell it was in Massachusetts and said, give us your armory, give us your powder and all that stuff. And those, it did not go well for those. I'm not talking about the British. It did not go well for the people in that town. When they did that. And Seven Wonders has it right there. It says they don't have to go door to door to do that. They can freeze your assets. Now you're screwed. You can't buy food. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't do any of that shit.
Well, again, realistically, they're not going to go door to door. They're going to start whittling. So they're going to say, oh, well, first off, wait a minute. bumps or pistol braces, no way. Or yeah, no problem, just register them as NFA. There's no issue there. Just they're now SBRs. So then, boom! All of a sudden, it's $200 to make a small rifle again, and then add something like throw. I don't know. There's lots of ways that it can start putting financial burdens on possession or acquisition, which they're already starting with the universal background checks, right? That's going somewhere, doing something, and paying someone. So it's already creating onerous, right, to possess, and that's how they do it, through that kind of attrition too. And that's a tough one to get people to rally behind, because that'll be a little bit nibbles. And black rifles, I mean, come on. I don't know. I guess they're going to go after black rifles first, but it'll only take them like 5 minutes after they get rid of black rifles to go after scoped rifles. They'll say, oh, well, in this country, we have elk. So anything that's bigger than an elk or anything that we don't think needs to be done for elk, right? Boom, don't need it anymore. If you're going to go to Africa, then you get a rifle there. Southpaw is saying the red flag, and that gets rid of your door. That accomplishes a lot of your door-to-door right there too.
I don't understand the reference.
The red flag laws, where you allow people to use the bureaucracy as a weapon, and
You let people snitch on each other, you mean?
Yeah, well, no more than that, because snitching,
Like they did in Germany, rat out your Jewish neighbors.
Well, again, that implies that there's something bad going on. But yeah, to use it as a weapon, to use it as the bureaucracy, the cause and effect of the bureaucracy, the mandatory minimums, and our hands are tied, we have to. That's just the same thing we saw on YouTube, right? We're not going to do anything, but we're just going to let these people have the power to do stuff, and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, we'll bring the Southern Poverty Law Center in and let them decide what's good speech and not good speech.
Yeah, all they have to have is one or two people that decide their role is to, use that new tool, that new weapon, to fight for safety, and their full-time gig could be doing something stupid like that. It's a petty little crap.
Well, I don't know. It all comes down to we're a minority. We're still bigger than the total armed forces of the United States, but we're still a minority, and a lot of people just don't get it. They just don't understand what the hell the Second Amendment's all about. They don't understand about how could my friendly government that sends me my special check every month be a bad thing. I mean, why do you people need guns in order to resist the government when the government is so wonderful and gives us all the crap that we need? And there's a lot of friggin' wage slaves, and there's a lot of welfare slaves out there, and us free guys, we're in the minority.
Well, and you don't even have to be in any of those groups that you're talking about to be in that same mindset, because you could be completely indifferent. And again, say, not necessarily be a religious, like, a fondness for the state. You could just, not be afraid of the state. You could just think, state's there, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The fire department's great. I like roads. And, and these people that are concerned about the tyranny, like, I don't see tyranny. I see roads, and I see a fire department, and, healthcare. And
yeah,
blah, blah,
I go to
blah.
work every day, and I'm supporting my family. What's the problem?
Yeah. So when the argument is framed that gun owners are either, 1776, 3%, Second Amendment, and everything is catchphrases, and then of course NRA, and then that we allow that to happen, then that's the only thing that they're offered. Then what do you expect? Any rational person is going to deal with the facts that are presented to them. So I'm going to say this, and I know I'm talking to the choir, but who knows if people watch the show or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. We just got a black guy, right? We got a black guy in December when Trump basically did what Obama threatened to do with the executive actions. Trump did an executive action that changed law, and that's we're in the midst of the consequences of that, or the repercussions to that. And then almost immediately we start seeing these, the first time that any kind of anti-gun bullshit has gone through our House of Representatives since like '94. So we've seen two unprecedented infringements happen in the last couple of months. And that's difficult. That's a black eye. And it's frustrating for those of us that are aware, and those of us that consider ourselves activists, and those of us that work towards, resistance to that stuff. And so when we see it happen, it's frustrating. And our first reaction is to, reel over from the hit and to decide and to wonder if if our strategy is correct, if we should be in this fight, if this is really what we signed up for. And those are all valid, reactions to a blow. So I'm going to just offer the encouragement that the work that everyone has done through all their different efforts throughout the years in sharing their experiences with firearms has changed the playing field. It has changed our society, and it has offered influence that it is subtle. It isn't necessarily obvious. And the influence that we've had in our YouTube channels and in our blogs and in our Instagram presence, in our chats like this one and others, has affected society to the extent that we've defended what we've got now. We have constitutional carry in Oklahoma. Let's not forget the wins. We have a playing field right now that might not be a complete win for us. Of course, let's be realistic. We rarely ever have complete wins in anything in life, but this could be a heck of a lot worse. And if our efforts hadn't been, if we hadn't put in the work over the last year since 2013, I suspect we'd be in a much more tyrannical situation than right now. So it's not obvious that our efforts have given us the scenarios or the situation that we've got now. And it's, again, it's natural reaction to question. I want to encourage everyone, though, that I think we're on the right track, and our goal is to change the opinion of firearms in society. And you don't force someone to do that. You do that through offering knowledge and sharing your experiences. And the mundane and the day-to-day might seem boring or repetitive or unnecessary, but that accumulates. The internet is different than any other means of communication we've ever had. Everything accumulates. Everything is searchable. Everything is referenceable, and the content that you put out there does contribute to a total, and that total is resisting the antis from just completely walking over everything. And we can't expect, when we go to the range, we buy a new rifle, we buy the new ammo, we buy the new optic. We don't go to the range with unrealistic expectations that every shot is going to be a bullseye. We know that there's a certain amount of skill that we have to obtain. We have to learn that tool, and then we have to practice with it. Same thing with politics, same thing with society, and same thing with just our general interests, and I guess with freedom, right, with liberty. The cost of liberty is eternal vigilance. So just want to throw that out there, that this is something that's not new. We've had hits before, and the reaction to that has been similar. And I don't know, I wish I could talk to everybody out there who's feeling this way, but hopefully there's something you can take from that, and remember that it's not over. We've got 2020 coming, and we've got all the opportunity in the world between then and now, or now and then, to affect influence and to hone our messages. We have a lot of data from the last couple of days of all these debates, and the refusal to acknowledge positions based on these infringements. And hopefully people will be resolved to take some of that data and dissect it, to share that interpretations of it, to share the incorrect logic and the assumptions based on lies, not taking into consideration the actual facts. And those are opportunities for us to share actual knowledge and to get conversation going. So it's never over, and it's never easy. Hopefully you enjoy the conversation and the challenge, and hopefully you're up to it, because it's up to us to lead by example for the next generation. We talk about the next generation. They don't just get to come in and play. They don't just get to come in and purchase and buy. They also get to come in and defend and work. So our work ethic will go down to them, right?
Well, the good news is the anti-gun folks are really showing their true colors, and like you said before, when it's the small little bites that nobody notices. But when they come in with the big meat cleaver and start hacking stuff up, everybody notices. And I think that, as you've seen from some of the rhetoric that's gone in at the debates in the House, it's becoming obvious what the real agenda is here. And hopefully that'll motivate some of the people who are standing on the sidelines saying, it's not that bad, to see just how bad it really is. So
It's awesome, certainly. And I
Yeah.
want to take a second to interrupt you because that's true. They could not have more deliberately, blatantly suggested that their goal is removal of semi-automatics in any capacity over 10 rounds in a magazine. They said that over and over and over. That should negate any future suggestion that they are, this is the last step, because they'll often say that, well, this isn't a slippery slope. This isn't the beginning of a bunch of bites. This is a lot, blah, blah, blah. So now we actually have, like, say, quotes from these guys from this thing in the record that they cannot deny. Their goal is no semi-automatics. Their goal is and no detachable mags over whatever many rounds they consider. Anyway, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
You're 5 now. Yeah. Well, and I just want to make a comment to General Relatively out in the YouTube side. He said he heard that Trump said he will veto both of the bills. That is not true. What Trump said was he has been advised that he should consider vetoing them. That's a big stretch from him vetoing them. Remember, Trump is not a pro-gun guy. He's not an anti-gun guy, but he's not a pro-gun guy.
Oh, I don't know about that. That's debatable. But here's the thing. If we get a bunch of suck asses in Senate who want to, for whatever, play whatever chess or game or whatever little thing they want to play, and they go, oh, well, we're going to go ahead and allow this because it's a compromise and this will blah, 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 and whatever their justifications for infringement are, and they pass it to him thinking that he's going to veto it. Heck no. I don't like anything about that scenario.
No.
I don't want them
and look at
it so they can pass responsibility onto another branch of government. No. They need to have the consequences of us. They represent us. They don't get to say, well, we thought he was. No. You are being told what to do by us. We should be super active right now with contacting those Senate representatives, also scolding the 8 Republicans and all the other Democrats that blindly followed this stuff. In the name of suicide prevention, in the name of victim abuse, they should be held accountable for their irresponsible lawmaking. But sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I just want to throw that in there, that if Trump is going to suggest that he's going to veto it in this woosy ass, like, light-footed way like that, that just seems like it's emboldening a bunch of fucking wishy-washy senators to say, oh, well, we think we can just give it to Trump. We thought he was going to veto it.
Well, I keep coming back to the bump stock ban because I still, to this day, after how many years now, year, 2 years, there still has never been a report from a government agency that said, yes, the bump stocks were used in the shooting. And it was one shooting. Remember, it was only one shooting, and they have a huge amount of forensic evidence. I mean, all they have to do is match one round to one barrel. That's all they got to do. And say, yep, we can absolutely prove that the bump stocks were used in that shooting. But they haven't done that. And I remember when I was arguing this in front of our state Senate last year, in front of our judiciary last year, I said, I have never found an article, even articles that say bump stocks used, when you drive down into the text, it's, well, not used, they were found, and no one's actually said whether they were used or not. And anybody who actually said they were used was not a government official, was not part of the police or the FBI or the judiciary. It was always some unnamed expert that says, well, based on the pattern of shots that I heard, I know that was a bump stock that was used. And all of this crap about the bump stocks, one incident, and never proven, or at least no proof put on the table for us that accessory was actually even used. And yet now here we are, we're going to deprive people of their property right? We're going to ban an item, and we're going to change the definition. We're literally changing the definition of what constitutes a machine gun, all based on that. And there's no factual basis behind it, other than the fact that weapons were found in the room with those accessories. And that it just blows my mind, the level of bullshit involved here, the level of pure emotion. You go right to the facts. Long guns less than 4%. Automatic guns, some small a portion. AR-15 black rifles, some small proportion of even that, and it's crazy. It's absolutely freaking nuts that you can't look at this and say, what the hell's really going on? It's like the 32,000 a year that get killed, and 60% of those are suicides. But of the ones that are left, the vast majority are gang killings. And it's like, please, can't we please just wrap our heads around the real evidence here? It's not the regular people that are the problem.
Well, and that's an excellent thing to bring up, because that wasn't successfully challenged at all, and they fell back. The anti people that were supporting this garbage in their opening statements, and then as I guess defense or justification for their infringements, would reference that this is and this is their quotes, which are wrong, that this is a uniquely American issue, and that it's this number of deaths compared to wealthy countries. So of course they're going to ignore Mexico, our nearest neighbor, and then other countries that aren't making enough money to be counted. They don't count. But then the other thing that, like you mentioned there, not only is it gang, but gang blows it off. Gang makes it seem like we've got a gang problem in this country, and it's just a part of our culture, and it's just one of the reasons why guns shouldn't work with this culture, because we got this gang thing. It's 5 counties, and I suspect if you looked at those counties, it would be 5. It would be a certain amount of neighborhoods. So this is completely a phenomenon. The numbers, the results, the consequences that they'll use to justify these infringements on everyone are based on the illegal activity that happens in very, very few regions, very few locations in this country. And you're right, that isn't focused on. It's barely focused on in the firearms industry, or in the people who are aware. And I think it's not as though we've dropped the ball in this one. There's a lot to cover. There's a lot of angles to attack freedom on. And they haven't used this specific one in a while, or at least without a lot of momentum. So we need to double down on this. But there's lots of opportunity. Like you say, everything that they justified, everything that they set their positions based on is all bullshit. It's all fake, and it can all be. There's lots of potential for ways to show the inaccuracies in their positions from pretty much every angle. The international side, the domestic side, and the numbers. Again, when you talk suicides and stuff, whether or not you want to agree that suicide should be included in there, there's lots of potential for dissecting their positions.
Yeah, but the problem is it's not a factual argument; it's an emotional argument, and that's the reason this is supposed to be a republic and not a democracy. Because in a republic, the individual's rights are held above the needs of the state and the community. And, all these socialist progressives, all they care about is the great state and and all of that. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we really honestly, if the branches of government were doing their job, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because the SCOTUS would be standing up saying, no states, you can't pass these kind of gun restrictions. You are infringing on the Second Amendment. You have to stop doing this. And we just can't do it because it's not popular. And that was the whole purpose of having a republic, was the fact that there were certain things that shouldn't be messed with, no matter what the majority says. It's the five wolves and a sheep debating on what are they going to have for lunch. It's just ridiculous. It's very irritating. I honestly didn't plan on spending my retirement years at the state capitol building fighting stupid ass gun control laws. It's just ridiculous.
Well, thank you for doing it. People always say thanks for your service when they hear somebody's enlisted or whatever, which is appropriate. But I want to say thanks to you, and you represent all the other people that, like you say, didn't anticipate doing it. It's not something you look forward to. It's not your passion or anything, but you're willing, and you've got the resources and the willingness to do it. So thank you for that. And I'm thanking everybody who does that.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it.
Well, and it might seem frustrating, especially when we get a blow like this, but it's not the end. And Sevin is talking about alternative ways to communicate. Ultimately, there's always going to be ways to stifle communication, but let's remember that our position here isn't some blind devotion to a motto or some sort of thing. It's just literally just being good to each other. So if they separated every good person in the world into separate cells, they'd still be good people. So no matter what they do to hinder communications, a bunch of good people with good intent are still going to be doing good stuff out there. So I have 100% confidence that if they turned off the internet tomorrow, we'd still have the greatest country on the planet, based on the way that we all came here knowing that we wanted to be part of this. We weren't what's the word? Conscripted into it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so that's tonight's show. Thanks for jumping in. Thanks for the people that are participating in the conversation out there. I'm not sure why nobody jumps in the shows anymore. We used to have full panels, but we'll continue to do the show every day. And thanks, Psycho, for jumping in. And let's see, tomorrow's Friday, so we've got Budget doing a show tomorrow. We've got I'm forgetting. Gary does his Friday night Ball Territory. We'll be back here tomorrow. Am I missing somebody else's show tomorrow? Sarge does his on there. I don't know. I'm probably missing somebody else's show. So you can check that out over on the schedule over on Gun Channels. If you're doing a show and it's not on the schedule, let me.
Yeah, Clover's doing something tomorrow, right? Doesn't he always do a Friday show?
He used to do a Friday show, but now he records the show on his own schedule and then releases it on Friday. So it'll be coming out tomorrow. But most of us who are following Clover can watch them earlier on Patreon. I want to encourage everybody to share the Patch Batch project. It is a project we've got going, and it was an opportunity for all these different 2A organizations and projects to work together and share the project. And we've got 16 people out of 200 on board already. We still got a couple of weeks left. So I'm sure most of the people in here have already participated if they're planning on it. But like they were talking about in Clover's chat earlier, sharing is a super important tool. Sharing that link on different platforms, on different websites, on different places will let the little tubes underneath the internet see that it's got more validity potentially and help with the sharing. So we do appreciate anybody that can help share that link out there. And we'll be back tomorrow.
Cool.